On the Level podcast, your Masonic podcast. Join the hosts Billy McIntyre and Sam Earl Sedgey as they delve into the world of Freemasonry.
Hello and welcome to On the Level podcast. I'm your host, Sam Earl Sedgey, and I am with my illustrious companion, my venerable sir knight, my brother in arms, in battle, in war, Billy McIntyre. How are you, Billy?
Great, Sam. Great. It's been great. We've had a wonderful grand sessions. We've come out, people's come out that hasn't been out in years. We had bigger numbers. It was a great turnout. I was really proud of the Arkwright.
Mate, it was freaking epic, and it was even more epic because on the Thursday night when I went to I turned up, so I had stuff to do. So I was only there for like one day, and the Friday I had to leave early because of an invitational in the gaming industry, which I really had to go to because I missed it for 2 prior years because I wasn't in the country when they were holding it, and this was the one time I was here. I used to go there religiously every year before my flights, and where I was around the world had conflicts, and they would always run it early July, and I was always away early July, and this is the one time they ran it a little bit later in July, which was this weekend. So I managed to be in the Grand Council sessions, which was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. But what was really funny was there was the Royal Arch dinner on the Royal Arch dinner of the Royal Arch of Illinois Grand Line. The Grand Royal Arch had a dinner from their grand sessions, which unfortunately I missed. But in Masonry, God, family, work, then Masonry, and I had work. I had a massive work commitment that day, and I also had family to the commitment as well. And that's you have to prioritize those before Masonry. Trust me, I'll go to that later. So anyhow, went to dinner. I didn't have a ticket, but they had spare tickets. So I bought a ticket from the guy running the dinner. We went in and we found a table. We sat down, and then we made some extra chairs because our new past Grand Eminent Commander Jamie Emery had 2 very special guests who I had no idea who they were. One happened to sit next to me, and I had no clue who he was. Very, very well-dressed man from Minnesota. And I found out he was a Sir Knight, a Knights Templar for Commandery. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Very well reserved, very well behaved, very well dressed. And he was getting a bit hungry, and we're waiting. And I volunteered to take care of all the tables and select people.
Yeah, you did.
Because there was no one else who was doing it. So look, I said to the Grand High Priest, the most excellent Grand High Priest past, who was running it, said, do you want me to do it? He's like, yeah, he's a good friend of mine, Danny Gaddis. Anyhow, and if you're listening, Danny, hello. I do the tables, and we're not thinking straight.
Yeah, let me tell this part because I really enjoyed it.
Go.
So Sam, being Sam goes around and he's releasing tables. Now you'd think he'd be releasing it for the people that was in charge, but not Sam. He went off and he was going on some kind of wild ride around releasing tables. Well, come to find out, our tables left. Well, the 2 gentlemen that was there that were, we thought, just regular Grand Masters from a different state. Because that's what we thought. They were with us. Well, they ended up last in line. Well, we run out of food. Okay. Well, these guys weren't just Grand Masters from another state. They were Grand Encampment people. And they really took it well. We all had a good laugh about it. But of all people, that we run out of these guys out of food. And, of course, Sam, and everybody laughed. These guys, and they come up with some food for them later. It wasn't like they starved.
Yeah, it's just my story.
It was just, it was just funny. It was so good.
Story
I'll never
of my life. And the thing is, I didn't even have no idea they're grand people. I just thought they're just friends. I'm just so in my world sometimes, and I was kind of like really hungry. And anyhow, the gentleman next to me turned out to be the Grand Deputy Eminent Commander of the Knights Templars of the entire United States of America. This is
Yes,
huge.
that is huge. And so what you got to understand is there's a grand officer for every state, and there's grand line for every state. Well, the grand encampment is over every grand state in the United States. That's for the people that's not Knights Templar that might not know. These guys wield a lot of power, and you couldn't have met two nicer men in your life.
Oh
These
man,
guys were the best.
these
And you'll find
guys.
out later on our interview. I mean, that's who we're going to interview. And these guys, top notch, man, top notch. We
Mate,
laughed and
mate,
had a good night, not even knowing who we were.
they weren't only
We just,
top notch. They weren't only top notch. They were inspiring.
oh, absolutely.
They were inspiring. These are real Knights Templars. Like if they said to me, mate, if they said to me, Billy, and they drew their swords in their Knights Templar tabard, and they had the Knights Templar crest and the shield, they're like, "Charge forth, brother knights, to battle." I would have taken my sword out of the.
Well, yeah.
Out of
And you're
God
going to hear in the
forth.
interview, they inspired me so much just in our interview that I said, I'm already a past eminent commander. But I'm
Yes.
ready to re-up.
Yeah,
You know,
same
I'm ready to
here.
start over at the
Yeah,
bottom.
yeah, same here. And so what's really cool is we've got this interview that's coming up, and we're going to do more work with them and the Grand Encampment. And that, to me, I'm geeking out because I'm huge on Knights Templars. I give lectures around the state of Illinois and other places about the history of Knights Templars. And I'm really dialed into that. And you get a bit of history in that interview as well. They liked it so much. They enjoyed us so much, and we enjoyed them so much. And there was such a huge bond between us and them that they wanted us to do another recording. Unfortunately, I was away. And so they've invited us to the Grand Encampment, which I'm geeking out on, by the way. I'm really geeking out on this.
Sure.
And we'll be hopefully, God willing, and if God willing, we'll be interviewing all of them, including the Grand Master of the Knights Templars of the United States. If we're blessed, mate. Oh my!
Well, if not, this gentleman, if everything works out right, he'll be the next triennial, which is in
dude,
a couple years from now. He'll be the next
Grand Master,
grand. Yeah.
mate. So what we're going to try and do with them, ladies and gentlemen, is we're trying to build a series. I'm going to try and build a series with them, if possible, if we're blessed, if we're fortunate, if they have time. And we're going to try and build a series with them, and we're going to try and introduce you to the United States Grand Encampment of Knights Templars, and just show you how awesome they are, and the strive of making great leaders amongst men, and inspiring men to be better versions of themselves, but not only being better versions of themselves, to be leaders in their community, and to help the needy, the poor, the widows, the orphans, and everything of our ancient rights, and just be good men. And so,
Right.
and so, for example, back when the original Knights Templars, there was a rule where your first and foremost duty was to protect the poor, the orphans, and the widows. And a lot of this came from one of their original mission statements, which was protecting the pilgrims on the road to the Holy Land, Jerusalem. And the reason for that was the road to Jerusalem was extremely treacherous. All you have to do is go through how treacherous it was for entire crusading armies to get there, let alone a bunch of pilgrims who don't have any bodyguards, any military force, and are going through occupied foreign lands full of bandits, criminals, and all sorts. And even some sly lords and barons who may take thievery and robbery to enhance
Sure.
again, because you got to remember, there wasn't a police force. The first actual police constable force was in London in the early, I think it was 1800s. And so there wasn't a police force in all these nations. It was literally the local militia or the military was really to protect the lords or barons of the land, and hence the king. And the peasants and farmers didn't have a military force around them unless the soldiers were doing a patrol, and that was it.
Right. And another good point to make. These guys were easy pickings because every one of them was bringing an offering to the temple. So
Exactly.
they knew when they seen somebody on that road, they could tell they were pilgrims. They knew they were bringing either money or some kind of animal to sacrifice. So they knew they were easy targets. They were going because they were going to worship the Lord. And so most of the time they're not going to be carrying lots of weapons, and they're going to have something that's worth money to take.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there wasn't much in the early Christian side. There wasn't much animal sacrificing, but But what really does mean is, for them to sustain themselves, it was very normal for them to have maybe a
To
couple,
eat. Yeah, you know what? I said that wrong. You're absolutely right.
they cut a couple of sheep and feed and stuff like that, so they can basically sustain themselves during the
Right.
travels, and that was a commodity. And also, don't forget the Saracens as well. There were also the opposing religion, which wasn't all the time very friendly to the Christians. Some parts were, some parts weren't, and it was very hostile in other areas. So the Templars' role was to protect them, and they did a very good job of that. Because the thing is, you have these heavily armored knights who all they do every day is learn the art of war, and also be basically monks, religious priests, basically, and that's a deadly combination. And when you have men fighting for God or Christ, or for a particular religion, and you're faith bound absolutely without any fear, you become very dangerous. And to top it off, a lot of these men were already military men, and they're already knights, but they were in service. These were your what we would call today extreme religious knights who were prepared to give their life to God. And the difference is, and what you also need to understand, is that if you're a knight in those days, you were a noble. You were of a noble class. And so what that meant is your biology, your muscular body. So nobles were very well fed. There was a whole breeding program of who to breed with who to marry to who to get the best breed. And the reason why breeding was so important is you needed a brutish body, at least, a big, muscular, very athletic, because back then the sword and shield was might, and armor was
Yeah.
might. The pen wasn't that mighty. There wasn't much of a legal system back then compared to today. It was really brute force makes the law, basically, in a lot of aspects. And brute force armed up with the latest technology, which is fully chainmail armor and shields and a really good weaponry, which is important, because what other people don't understand is a noble might have a sword and a shield, okay, an armor, and then if you have like a bandit or a thief or like a peasant, the quality of their weapons had a massive difference. There was a massive difference. And to give you an example, in kinds of difference in terms of weaponry, it was like the knights had access to machine guns and night vision and grenades and all the special forces stuff, and the peasants had basically access to kitchen knives,
Slingshots.
kitchen knives, and pitchforks like they have today, or rakes, and that was it. Or maybe a butcher's knife if they're lucky. Metallurgy and blacksmithing, and the purchases of really good quality stuff was extremely expensive, and only noble houses and the wealthy could afford the best, and everyone else had absolute trash worth of like cutlery and all that kind of stuff. So once you then take this in hand, where most of the peasants or thieves or bandits or anyone who wasn't noble were malnourished, massive deficiencies in vitamins and stuff, where all of them may have had some sort of health issue. I mean, if you had put one, let's just say, 24-year-old, if they survived to that age, because the average age of there was 35. So if you had some sort of 18-year-old peasant or bandit, and you put them up against a noble, and you did a dental plan with them and health plan, you'd be like, holy crap, you've got leeches and all sorts of things. You've got like possibly 3 years to live. And you look at Noble, he was better off. He still had a few issues because remember, there's no more than innocent. But you're like, oh, okay, you've got 10 years more to live. You'll live to 35 and you'll live to 22, which in that time was huge. And if you had to race them, or do athletics, the noble class would beat you because it was all about athletics back then. And it was all about breeding. And there was a massive variance in access to quality of life compared to a lowly peasant. And so what I'm trying to say is you literally had really well-built killers, men who were fed well and fed with lean food, had a good diet, and were muscular and built and just a bunch of killers. And they were mainly facing against other men who had body frames of teenagers because of they were all malnourished and stuff like that. So the reason why the idea of a Knight Templar was so mighty back then is, well, think about a guy coming out from a gym and he's all tanked up to an extent. And at the same time, the rest of society, if you're not a noble and you're a man, is malnourished, have a small frame. And you can go to third world countries, and if you go to like China and you go to like people in a generation of in their 60s, 70s, 50s, and even 40s, you can see that their physique compared to the young Chinese, where now a lot of them are tall, they're big, they're muscular, they're very different from their grandparents and their fathers. And that's because in the PRC opening up, slaves, billions of their population was super malnourished, super deficient in a lot of things, and therefore that was going for centuries before they had a massive peasant class. So you can really see the difference in performance. And back then, that's why breeding was so important. And then that breeding brought in that air of superiority. We are superior to these people because look at us and look at them. And sadly, back then, if you're a serf, if you're a peasant, you probably would remain a peasant for the rest of your life, and your life was short-lived. If you were a noble, it was very likely you will have many generations of nobles until another noble came and knocked you out, or another king or another country came and knocked you out and replaced you with their nobles and their people. So it was a very brutal time. So my point being is, now let's walk back to everything I've told you, and I could even go even more in depth in the biology, and this type of history is very important, because in our day and age, when we say, oh, Knights Templars against bandits, in our head and imagery, we're thinking of, okay, Knights Templar, strong guy, but against 15 other well-built strong guys.
Yeah, right.
And it was,
that's because the movie mentality.
Yes.
That's how Hollywood has portrayed, even the lowest of bumbling, pirates or anything they put in Hollywood. They're all well-built men. They're not just little scrawny guys.
And that's where you get these massive, so look, there are these stories. I mean, you got to think. In the Battle of Acre, when Richard Lionheart charged out with 13 knights against an army of 20,000 Molmuk men, including horse archers and Saladin, why that army broke and just ran away. Who were the Malmuks? They were slave soldiers. What was a slave? A super malnourished human being that wasn't fed as well as a dog, basically, but was fed just enough to survive and carry an okay low-grade spear. Molmuk soldiers were not equipped with the best weapons.
Certainly, and they fought because they feared the whip.
Absolutely.
If they didn't fight, they got beat to death.
They got beat to death. And yeah, of course, the nobles, they had beautiful scimitars, they had beautiful shields, diamond-encrusted shields, all that kind of stuff. But they were a small elite against a massive slave army. And again, because of the malnourishment, their bodies were smaller. I mean, you can go to Molmuk skeletons and you can see the difference, how small they were. And you can go to some knights in the Europe, and especially Templar knights, and see how muscular, how big their skeletal bodies were. And so you're looking at these 6-foot men, European men, these Templar knights, fully armored up, and fighting of grown men who had skeletal bodies of 14 and 15-year-olds, and sometimes 12-year-olds. And so obviously, if you got a full-grown man with a massive greatsword swinging it, he's going to slice through a lot of 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's just the way, dude. It's just the way it is. There's nothing else.
And you got to think they're fighting not for any reason. They're fighting because they know that if they don't, they'll be killed anyway.
Exactly.
They're not fighting for a cause. They're not fighting because they believe in their heart what they're doing is right. They're fighting because they're forced to. So they're hardened in this. The only reason they're fighting is they're trying not to be killed.
Exactly. And the whole thing about that was just sheer numbers. I mean, they were just there to die. They were there to die and just soak up the numbers. Cannon fodder. And so now, let's walk back. The original Knights Templars, who were knights, European knights, mainly predominantly French knights, who then encompassed loads of other knights from the rest of Europe. These tanks living back then, in many eyes, superhuman because of the access they had compared to most of the peasantry class or slave class in the Middle East, basically. Protecting. I mean, bandits would have thought twice to go against them, literally, because it's like these bandits weren't like going and eating rock star 5-star dinners. They were fending to eat every single. In fact, they probably had lots of malnourishment. They probably had worms. They probably had tooth decay, and so they weren't at the best of health. But they would go and they would rape and they would pillage. They would steal, and they would then live off other people's miseries because they could. But they lived a torturous life, and a lot of them came from either the peasantry class or the soldier class or the thief class or whatever. And suddenly you got these well-trained killers who are knights, who could take 3 or 4 of them on, who are well-armored, have better grade weapons. A lot of their weapons are not that great, so the chainmail will protect them from basically slashing weapons and stuff like that. So although, let's just say, 3 of them may have slashed their little swords or whatever, the chainmail protected. To them it was like the Knights Templar were impervious in a lot of cases, but they weren't. It's just they had better gear that protects them from this type of stuff. Now, if it was a Knight Templar versus a Knight Templar, or a Knight Templar against one of Saladin's elite guard, or if it was a Knight Templar versus, I don't know, like a Viking or whatever, which or whatever, or a Norman knight or whatever it is, yes, they would have less of a chance of survivability because the weapon grades would be similar and all that kind of stuff. It'll be a bit more of a tough game. So that's why the Knights Templars became so popular, because they were so successful. They were living, walking tanks, basically, and that earned them.
And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but also, we need to, for people that don't know, they also trained all the time.
Dude,
that was their life. Their life was training. So not only were they going against a very inferior fighting class, they spent their life training to be the best. They're like our special forces, or even anybody's special forces. That's what they did.
Absolutely.
That was their life, to train, learn to kill, train.
Absolutely.
Be better. And they're putting themselves up against people that are to the top of the game, and they're all competing against each other to be the best of the best. Because in their mind, they have to do their best for God.
And there was an element, and it's kind of funny, because some people have said this, and there is some truth. I think George Lucas may have admitted to this a bit. There is a bit of a Jedi theme. They're not Jedi. They don't have lightsabers. They can't use their minds to move stuff and make people think. But and to give you an example, an actual Knights Templar ritual was when they initiated a new knight in the service. There was 3 hours of silence. And this 3 hours of silence was quite an often thing they would do on a monthly basis, or sometimes, depending how often they would do it, maybe weekly. And they'll sit down. They could read, they could draw, they could do whatever, but it's absolute silence. And that kind of meditation, and sometimes it was very often on a daily basis, if they're not doing anything, that type of deep meditation. And that's very similar to so we've got this in Bushido monks, we've got this in Shaolin monks. There was a sense of religious silence and meditation and deep thought. And when they went to battle, they were the only unit that would kill in silence. There wasn't, let's fight, let's kill. They may have charging or marching orders or, watch out for this or whatever, but they literally, and that's very scary.
Because they was getting all their signals from the flags.
And so when you have killers who are just cutting you down and saying nothing, and it's just eerie, that's really scary. And then when you've got a unit that doesn't flee from the battlefield, unless their banner fell down, and they would take 3, and then it will be only unless all the other Christian banners are gone, and they literally most of them would die to death. That is terrifying medieval combat. So the point is, these guys became very successful, super successful, so successful that they became a military force and they became a military power. But at the same time, the most important thing for them is they won the hearts of the people. And they really, really protected the poor, the blind, the orphan, the widow. Charity for them was huge. And what they were very smart in doing were taking on board people and putting them into their own labor force, because the Knights Templar weren't just a military organization. They had massive farmland, they had massive agriculture, they had their own navy, so they had their own workforce, they had their own blacksmith, they had their own industry and economy. They built their own industry and economy through the lands of Europe. And for that to happen, you have to have a workforce. You have to look after your workforce. And so that sense of community and charity is that workforce, especially in the Holy Land, became protected and in Europe. And so they built this massive tradition and this insane economy. And as you know, they became bankers. So one of the ideals of a Knights Templar is not only be the best version of yourself, like in Masonry, but there is a code of conduct. It's like it puts you a sense of, and you'll see it in the interview, and I'm not going to spoil it, but you go further and beyond to do the right thing for your community, and you have a sense of duty to be a leader. In whatever capacity that you can be. And that to me is huge. It's like a next level staff. And that's what blew me away in this interview. What are your thoughts, Billy?
My thoughts are, you're right on about everything. For the people that are not Knights Templar or Masons, either one, this is an honored thing that the Knights Templars and Masonry try to continue the tradition on. No, we're not out warriors. But our oath is that we will take care of the wayward Christians, and we will take care of the weak and the poor. That's what we're trying to carry on. The traditions as far as the protecting and take care of the community, just like Sam said. There's so much value in the Templar. If you listen to the oath and you take it to heart,
100%.
It will make you a better man.
100%.
It will make you a better man. And I don't know how we are on time, but for the people that's been listening and listening to us from the beginning, thank you so much. Please tell your friends. And I know we've alluded that we'll have episodes about historical stuff like we just talked about. But the problem is, and Sam will back me up on this, we're running into these incredible people that's willing to talk to us. And some of these are one chance in a lifetime. We got the Grand Master of Illinois coming up, and this man is a busy, busy man. He don't have time to sit down with people all the time, but he's going to sit down with us.
That's
so
huge.
Keep listening for that. We got some very incredible stuff coming up. Just bear with us because we'll get to all these things that we promised. I promise you. But we've got some great stuff coming up.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'll just say, Godspeed. And Sam, finish this up, man.
I can't follow that. All I've got to say is, let's go to the other side.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome back to this very, very honored and venerable interview. I'm actually geeking out here. So without further ado, Billy, we have a few guests and we're going to go around the round table. And as someone who talks a lot about Knights Templar history, we're going to go introduce ourselves. So I'll tell you what, Billy, we'll go and we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Jay and Jeff, and then we'll go to Jeremy.
Very good. Very good. So as you know, this is Billy McIntyre. I'm for one more day, the most illustrious Grand Master
of the Cryptic Council of the state of Illinois. And I co-host this with Sam. So here we go, without further ado.
Hello, I'm Jay Kennedy. I am the East Central Department Commander for the Grand Encampment Knights Templar for the USA, meaning that I have responsibility for the states of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and Kentucky.
Jeff Bolstead. I am the Right Eminent Deputy Grand Master of Grand Encampment Knights Templar USA, and I'm busily doing my duties here, but also feverishly preparing for the next triennium, coming up in 2 more years.
And I'm Jamie Emery, the current Right Eminent Grand Commander of the state of Illinois for 2 more days.
All right, so let's talk about your experience. How did you get started? What motivated you, and how did you? And tell people who are laymen, not Masons, what is the Grand Encampment, and how does that fit into the York Rite and Freemasonry? So I'll go to the deputy first, if that's okay. And
what part did you want to hear now first?
Well, go, that's what your story, your origin.
My story? How far back do you want to go?
As far as you want to go.
Well, I was born and raised on a farm in northeast Montana, 20 miles from North Dakota and 40 miles from the Canadian border, so way up there in the hinterland. And we did not, I mean, we had masonry in that area, but I didn't know about it. My wasn't anybody in my family that was a Mason, so the closest DMLA chapter, which I didn't know anything about then, but subsequently I found out, had DMLA been an option for me that I knew about, that was 60 miles away. But back in those days, I graduated from high school 50 years ago. So back in those days, we were only 8 miles from town. Okay? That's all, 8 miles. But it could have just as well been 800 miles from town. Because once we were out on the farm for the summer, that was it. We didn't see any of my classmates till school started in the fall again. So, I mean, it was just that was too far a trip to go into town. The interesting thing about it is that after I, graduated and got involved in whatever I was doing, I'd call up to talk to my mom and dad, and they would go to town 3 times a day for coffee. So things drastically changed after, I left, but that's another story for another day. Masonry, how I got involved with that, I didn't know a lot about it because I didn't come from that kind of a thing, but I had rented a basement apartment in Helena, Montana, where I still am a State Farm agent, but this was early in my career. And she was 90-some years old when I moved into that basement apartment. She lived above me. And I just made up my mind that I wouldn't leave there because it was very comforting for her to know that I was downstairs. So I'd come up and visit her and have coffee with her and all that kind of thing. But her son-in-law was heavily involved, not so much with masonry, but he was a Shriner, and he was in the divan. He was going to be potentate, and he ended up becoming potentate. But we were talking one time, and I said, well, it'd be kind of like fun to be a shrine clown. And he said, well, can I sign up and do that? Well, you got to do this first, And so that's how my journey began in 1990. I got heavily involved with not so much the Blue Lodge because they wouldn't let me do anything. I hadn't paid my dues or whatever, and they wouldn't even let me get in the line. They were recycling guys, and they wouldn't let me in the line, and I said, well, and to top it off, this is how far back this goes. When I joined, they let them smoke in open lodge.
Oh man!
And the lodge room was not very big, and they had the old theater seats in there that they got from some torn down theater or whatever. And every seat had one of those ashtrays coming up off the floor, and great turnout because their wives didn't want them smoking at home. So I go to lodge, it's just packed in there. I'm not kidding. You could not see the people on the other side of the
And everybody had
room. It was just a smoke fest in there, just a blue thing, And I said, I can't handle this, So once they finally decided that they better not do that anymore, change their ways, I said, well, I'll come back, So let me get active. I don't like to be a spectator. It just wasn't working. But subsequently, to become a Shriner, back then you had to join the Scottish Rite or become a Knight Templar, right? So my guy that got me signed up, he was a Scottish Rite guy. So that's what I did to become a Shriner. So, did the Scottish Rite reunion one week, did the Shrine the next week, and, there you go, you're a Shriner. So that's kind of how I got involved with stuff, and I became fairly involved with some of the rituals in the Scottish Rite, because I discovered that I could do parts pretty well and all that kind of thing. And once they, you prove yourself to them, they're shoving you all kinds of things. And pretty soon I got the main part and the 5 mandatory degrees, and and subsequently it comes on later down the road, they can't even do a reunion unless I'm available to do it. I said, we gotta check our hold card here. So then I got involved in Eastern Star, and that was a lot of fun. I became Worthy Grand Patron in Montana, and a lot of Masons kind of poo-poo Eastern Star, but I had a lot of fun with it. And the work is beautiful. The Associate Patron Lecture in Eastern Star is probably the most beautiful lecture and flows the best of anything that I've seen so far. But as far as becoming a Knight Templar, I did not know hardly anything about it. It just wasn't that big at that time where I was from, although they had it. And so they had a dinner one night, and they invited prospects, right? And they invited me. So I went and I signed up, and so I ended up becoming a Knight Templar. When I took the Order of the Temple, I said, this is my deal right here. Yeah. This is it. Because I'd seen it all. Amazing. And there was nothing like that. And I went home from that. It was at a festival kind of deal in Bozeman, which was about 100 miles away from where I lived. And I went home. I learned the commander part, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, I love that part.
And I've subsequently found out that the Ode to the Skull, my version that I do has 5 more verses than what's in the book, but that's how the guy taught it to me. So it's really cool. And when I discovered what they were leaving out, I just can't. I tried to do it right, but I don't know where to cut it off. As I just do it. That's the way it is. So I am crucifying the ritual, and yes, I am Deputy Grand Master, but it's just the way it's going to be, okay? So anyway, I really liked it and everything, and so they brought me in to do these festivals and stuff because I was good at the part, So, and there weren't that many people that were doing it in Montana, and the ones that weren't doing it that well, so they'd bring me in. So I right out of the gate, I go to the Grand Commandery session in Montana, and I'm talking to guys, and I want to get involved. They wouldn't give me a sniff. I mean, like, get out of here, Yeah, so I kind of got discouraged after that. And the Scottish Rite, they were, giving me a red hat and a white hat and all this kind of stuff. So I was more, and I became the PR for our valley and whatever. And I was that for 15 years. But, so I was just involved in other stuff. But finally, a guy came along, and I'd taken over his recorder job for our York Rite bodies. And he said, hey, he was the Grand Commander of Montana. And that's how I got involved in that. And then, I subsequently became Grand Commander, and our department commander for the Northwest at the time had been telling the Deputy Grand Master that, hey, you should come and look at this guy for your next. I didn't know this, but but he, at my session, he came out there. It was Dwayne Bott, and I didn't know that's what he was doing, or anything, but anyway, he came out and checked me out, I guess. But later on, he gave me a call and offered me to be department commander. And
Oh, wow.
so I took him up on that. And then after I became department commander a year later, some of the guys that were in the line, they came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to run for Grand Captain General for Grand Encampment." I said, "Me? You know, I'm from Montana. Nobody knows me." "Oh, no, you know, show you, yeah, we think you can do it." So I won. It was in Indianapolis in 2018, and Jay was there. And so that's how it happened. So here we are, knocking on the door of the 71st Triennial, and good Lord willing, I'll be Grand Master. Good Lord willing, Jay will be my Grand Captain General, and we'll have the 4 J's going strong. What else do you want to know about me?
So real quick, if you can real quick explain, we'll go to you in a second, Jay. Explain what is the triennial. So for people who don't know what the triennial is.
Okay, 3. So triennial is the actual session at the end of the 3 years. The triennium is the 3-year period. So that's what try being 3 years.
So you have a 3-year rotation. So you're
Yes.
part of the Grand Encampment.
Correct, 3
And
years.
every 3 years, the line goes up, basically.
Correct.
Perfect,
Correct.
perfect.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's what I wanted.
As opposed to a biennial
biennial.
session. So we're tri.
And this is Billy again. I just want to say I haven't left, but I can't follow that up, so I'm passing it right back.
This is Jay. So you want to hear my story and background? All right, great. So I joined Masonry about 25 years ago. I was initially raised as a Prince Hall Mason right out of college, maybe my last year in college, and moved over to Grand Lodge, Michigan, and had a really good mentor who was a past Grand Master, and another good mentor who I'd worked with when I was working with the Boy Scouts, and both of them pushed me on the York Rite. And so got involved in chapter, got involved in council, ultimately got invited or asked to join Commandery. And it was the gentlemen around me that told me, like, this is a place that I need to be. I love the ritual, I love the work, but most importantly, I loved being with those guys. And there was just something from the beginning that said Commandery is special and Commandery is different. And it was the way that we were embraced. It was the way the ladies were involved. It was just that, you know how you get that like visceral feeling that this is the right place to be? That's the feeling that I got. And it was so much so that I was knighted in 2007, in December of 2007. I met my wife for the first time in September of 2007. And in October, I said, "What are you doing the first weekend of December?" And she said, "Well, nothing." I said, "Okay, great. You got to come to my knighting." And she's like, "The Queen knighting? Like, what are you talking about?" And so I had to explain to her, like, no, like I'm joining it's Masonic organization, and I was the inspection candidate, which is a big thing in my home commandery. And so that was her first exposure to commandery. But all of the great, well, not, but most of the great pictures that I have of us together, my wife and I together, and subsequently my family, are around commandery. So she was there when I was knighted. Great picture that I've still got hanging in our bedroom of the night that I was first installed as warder, my first officer chair in the commandery. I have pictures of me on the dais as commander or prelate with my girl sitting on my lap. And it really just encapsulates everything that I felt before I joined Commandery and everything I've experienced since, which is that this is a family, and Templary has become that family. And even with working with Jeff and the other Grand Encampment officers, there is very much we care about you as a person, and we care about this organization, and we care about the order, but the order doesn't work unless the people who are here because they want to be here, and we create this feeling in this familial environment. And so I've been hooked ever since. I thought that I was first generation Mason. I didn't find out until probably about maybe 3 or 4 months before I was installed as Grand Commander, that on my father's side of the family, the first of our family to move up from the south to northern Michigan, became Masons. And so I have their records going back to like the late 1800s to early 1900s.
That's cool.
So in an instant, I went from thinking I was the only one in my family to now I have these records that go back over 100 years of my Masonic family, and that instant connection was just there. And so, I mean, when you got those experiences, right, you're hooked. You can't say no to continuing to invest in this organization. Yeah.
Let me real quick, Sam. I'm sorry. And I'd like to ask a question if I could, and if you, all three of you, if you take your turn, if you will. So we're talking to potential people that might want to join the Arkwright and then the Grand Commandery. And since you guys are high up on the list, give me a short presentation that would make me want to join. I'm already a Templar. Make these gentlemen want to join the Templar.
So I would say a couple of things, right? One is Templary has so many experiences that will allow you to feel like you are contributing not only to the Masonic order, but also to realize that you are contributing to your community. And so if you're out there and you're looking for a place where I can go in and see a tangible difference that's being made in society and my community through what I'm doing, as well as a tangible and visceral change in yourself, come join Templary, right? The Knights Templar Eye Foundation is our primary charity. It does incredible work to cure diseases of the eye for kids. And working through the researchers we work with and doing the work that they do, it has impact all over the world. And so there's just a great feeling of knowing that my little small part is helping to make sure that kids who otherwise might not be able to see are able to see, right, and enjoy a life with full vision and sight. The ability to bring these works into the community and to live out the Templar values and the principles of feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, binding up the wounds of the afflicted, through all the work that we do in a number of different ways, not only through the established programs, but knowing that in your local community you can figure out we need X, and you can go and do X and be empowered to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to being a Grand Encampment officer, and the line is, how do we empower the Sir Knights within the communities and the commanders to be able to do those things on a daily basis. And so if you're in any way looking for an opportunity to have that impact on the world, but also to find a better way to make a connection between yourself as a Christian and a Mason, Templar is the only place to be.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is Jeff. Okay. I think, in addition to what Jay said, I think that one of the big things that Templary does for you is enhance your Christian values. You have to be a Christian to be a Templar, and I get people saying, "Well, why do I have to be a Christian to be a Templar?" And my question to them is, if you're not a Christian, why do you want to be a Templar? And of course they don't have, I don't know, So it's not only the Christian aspect of it and learning about all of that. You also have to realize that Templary kind of stands alone. We're all Masons, correct? But when you do the Royal Arch or you go through the Scottish Rite degrees, each one of those degrees kind of builds on the other one, You agree with that, right? Mm-hmm. Templary, there is nothing in the Templar, the orders, that would, you need to, take the Royal Arch or take the Master Mason degree in order to understand what's going on in Templary. I mean, we've set it up that way because we sign concordance and all that you have to be a Royal Arch Mason, so you got to be a Master Mason, all this kind of stuff. But what you learn there doesn't build on whatever you're taking in the Order of the Red Cross or the Order of Malta or the Order of the Temple. Order of Red Cross, there's stuff there that, it's not even that Christian. It's not much more than what goes on in the Scottish Rite or the Royal Arch. So by taking those degrees, you kind of recognize some of the names and stuff and what's going on. But for sure, the Order of Malta and the Order of the Temple, None of what you did before has anything to do with those at all. So, for me, I just love that portrayal, particularly the Order of the Temple. But the Order of Malta is really cool also. It's like my second favorite, and it's even better than the 33rd degree in the Southern jurisdiction, Scottish Rite. 33rd degree Northern jurisdiction is kind of leaves a little bit to be desired, I think. It's more of a blessing kind of a deal, and it's a one-man show. The commander's doing it, but the Order of Malta is wonderful. Order of the Temple is wonderful, and you get in this. You get really involved in the commanderies and get involved in the doing the full form opening, for instance. And you can get as fancy as you want to with the wheel lines and all that kind of stuff. But you got everybody dressed in uniform, and they're looking sharp, and the camaraderie there is off the charts. And the leadership that you can learn throughout, not just commandery, but if all the areas of masonry that you're involved in, the other areas of masonry kind of prepare you in leadership to be a leader in Templary, basically, and in your community, and in your church, and whatnot, right? And because the only, I teach leadership stuff all the time to people, but you can have an event where they come to, say our Grand Encampment leadership course, which is a great course, great thing to come to. But if that's all you do, it's not going to do you any good. Leadership is the process. You have to do it every day, and you have to practice, and you have to practice, and you have to practice, and you have to let people be in leadership positions. That's how they learn. And there's no better place in society that can give you more practice than in the Masonic fraternity. And to me, that is the best reason for joining, is for that experience, because it helps you in your community life, it helps you in your business life, it helps in your family life. You can't even replace it, and if people would just realize that, everybody would join.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Jamie?
Please.
I don't know how to follow all that up, but you guys, I met Jay, 5 years ago, 5 or so years ago, and his little girls go with him almost everywhere. I was kind of hoping they'd be here this weekend, but everywhere I've went, my little oldest one, everybody asked me, where's she at? You travel everywhere. You're the same way. Everybody asks, where's the girls at? And it seems like this has actually accepted the family more than what any other organization in Masonry has done. It's not so much about going out and maybe going and sitting in a bar and drinking or something, but it's family oriented. Even at Triennial, there was, it was all and that's one of the things that I will say about this is it is probably the most family-oriented part of Masonry that I've belonged to, and they're accepting. Here in Illinois, we don't have a lot of our members are all older members. We don't have a lot of younger kids, and the grand officers they've got grandkids, but most of their kids are all older, so it hasn't really been. But the kids that have went through, like if you've seen, we've got a little one here this weekend. She's only about 4 months old, but she's got a lot of aunts and a lot of uncles now. And if she needs anything, all she's got to do is ask us, and we'll be there for her. So, but yeah, that's one of the things that's impressed me about this is it's more family, and it's gotten more. I've got to see it more traveling this year, and I've traveled around to the different states and everything. So, but I can't really say much else besides what you guys have already said about the rest of it. So I'll pass this back to Sam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to just add a few actual anecdotal things to what you said to bring everything you said to reality that's affected me. So a lot of what you said has actually touched a few nerves on me. So I think one of the most profound thing is the Order of Templars, one of the most beautiful degrees in Freemasonry, if not the most. The other thing is if you take the word seriously and your oath seriously, which I did, and as Jamie knows and you know, I'm a bit of a Knights Templar nutter and I do a bit of a history and lectures here and there. I took it really seriously, and that had a cause and effect to me in my community. We're told that a Knights Templar is supposed to go and help the worthy, poor and distressed, the widows and orphans within, 43 mile radius or 42 mile radius? 40 mile radius. And so there was this school, and it actually was because of Knights Templar. So what was really good about our ground commander here and the ground line here is every year they would issue out this check to our commanderies and say, here's this money, give it to any charities you want, okay? And so you choose. And so my local commandery, having this check for the first time, and we're all new guys coming in, we get all heated and passionate because it's charity, right? There's loads of charities to give. And so I'm like, well, why don't we I can make 4,000 pencils and give it to schools. I'm just thinking pencils in my head because I can make them, and we can just give them and people write. And people say, no, let's do it for this and let's do it for that. It got to one point, and we're all very passionate. I just phoned up a teacher, and her name was Diane. I said, Diane, what do you need? And it wasn't pencils. It was just out of the blue, and I didn't know what school she was in. And she said, well, the kids in our school, and we're talking about 6 to 12-year-olds in Peoria. So let me just give you an idea. You've got Caterpillar in Peoria. You got Komatsu in Peoria. You got some of the biggest hospitals in Illinois, in Peoria. But there are kids from Peoria, Illinois. But you have kids from 6 to 12 years old who are walking to school with their toes sticking out, not having underpants, right? Not being clothed properly, living in a box that they call a home for 2 families. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I remember my oaths. I'm like, we've got to do something about it. So instead of taking that 2,000, I said, no, we've got to go to the lodges and raise money for these kids, right? And I was, my eyes were bawling because I couldn't understand you could do these to kids. I mean, we've got all these corporations, and I just realized that we're it. Yeah. We are it. We are the thin red line, if you want to call it, or the thin white line, or thin whatever line. We are it. We Knights Templars it. So I went around, and we got $200 here, $200 there, and we got to like $800. And with that $800, bought these kids shoes, bought them trousers, bought them shirts, bought them pants. Some kids were not walking up with pants. It was just, I couldn't believe. I've got a 7-year-old. About that time, he was 5 years old. So to me, it kind of like hit me, right? And so we've been doing that now from our own money, not using the Knights Templar money from the ground every year. But I would not have done that if I didn't become a Knights Templar. It would not have gone into my head. I would not be part of a group to now. And the thing is, we don't know the kids. I said the important thing is not to meet them, but to have. And every year we get an itemized bill on everything that was spent from the school, and every single penny was spent on these. And they just really appreciate it. We don't want any accolades. We don't want anyone to know. If we can change one kid's life chances. And I was from a poor school in London where, the kids who wear the fancy trainers, it has a psychological effect. The kids at that age from 6 to 12, they recognize, why has that kid got this? And that affects their life chances. So if I can give anything that what you guys have said, and for me joining Masonry and then Knights Templar, I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't Knights Templar. It was reminding of my oaths, of what are we here for? And then realizing, really, we're it. There is no charity. There is no charity that gives shoes and trousers and clothes. We think there is, because we live in a world of convenience. Everything's on the phone. You want to buy something, boom, you can get it. You want to order some food, and we automatically think there's somebody else out there. But if we reach out and just ask questions to our local communities, you'll find out there's a lot of suffering. And that's our role as knights, basically. So I just wanted to bring some reality to what everything you've just said. My next question would be, what is, and this is for even some Sir Knights as well, and for Masons, because sometimes information is hard to get hold of because everyone's so busy. You know, Blue Lodge, we must do this, and then the focus is this, and Royal Arch, the focus is this, and Commandery, a lot of times is we got to get ready for our inspection. And, you know, some people want to get out the room quickly in Commandery meetings, and some people don't want to spend 2 hours talking. And so sometimes information is, you know, fair and few in between. Some places are better than others. Explain what the Grand Encampment was. What's the purpose of it? What does it do for Knights Templar of the USA? For those who just are aware of there's something called a Grand Encampment, but don't have any connection to it. Because you talked about the Eye Foundation, which actually touches my heart. My boy, he wears glasses, but thank God he's got like the lowest level for, you know, but that's a concern for me. I'm hoping when he's 18, there's a tech where he does a laser eye surgery or whatever once, and then he can see like I can see, you know? So it means, so Knights Templar, everything you guys do, and as a Knights Templar, just means volumes to me, so I pay a lot into that charity. So if we can start with, we'll go with Jay and see what you got to say from your experience, and then we'll go with you, Jeff, if that's okay.
So this is Jay. Full disclosure, whatever I get wrong, Jeff will correct, and please just ignore everything that I've said that is wrong. But from my perspective, the Grand Encampment is the baseline, right? So it is the organizational body that ensures that the tenets of Templary are the same anywhere you go. It's going to look different within each communities, as you mentioned, but the basic things that define who we are as Templars stays the same, and it is the guiding sort of North Star for where we all as Templars are going and where we're focusing. So not only in terms of the charities, the Eye Foundation, the Education Foundation, the Holy Land Pilgrimage, which we haven't talked about, and we can look up the Holy Land Pilgrimage if you want to know more about it. But the direction setting for the order is the Grand Encampment. And then the operational body and the oversight to pull this together, to maintain all those charities, to maintain the organization across the globe, actually, even though we're the Grand Encampment of the United States of America, we've got global reach. You need a strong set of leaders and administrators to make sure that the wheels keep turning and the cars keep running, and that the Sir Knights at the Grand Commandery and the constituent commandery level have what they need to keep going. Last thing I'll say, and tying back to what you had mentioned, is the vows, right? And so making sure that every Sir Knight that comes through the Grand Encampment, we all, when we kneel at that altar, we're taking our vows, we're all taking the same vows, right? And we know this, right? You know, across Masonry, across states, there can be derivation in terms of the ritual and things like that. We see that throughout the York Rite as well. And Grand Encampment is there to ensure that the same standards are there for everyone who becomes a knight. So you know when you sign on, you're agreeing to the same thing I'm agreeing to, and we can hold each other to that same standard.
Okay, this is Jeff. Number one, Grand Encampment is a sovereign entity. Like the Grand Lodge of Illinois is a sovereign entity. Royal Arch is not sovereign entity. Cryptic is not sovereign entity. Grand Encampment chartered every Knights Templar entity in the United States. The relationship between the Grand Commandery of Illinois or the Grand Commandery of Alaska or the Grand Commandery of Montana or Michigan, the relationship between that Grand Commandery and Grand Encampment is the same relationship that you have with your local Blue Lodge and your Grand Lodge. Okay? You see a lot of places that don't, their Royal Arch, their Grand Royal Arch doesn't belong to General Grand Chapter, okay? For instance, in Texas, Ohio, same way. Their Royal Arch and their Cryptic don't belong to the General Grants. Their Grand Commandery does. Because their Grand Commandery cannot leave Grand Encampment. It's the same thing as if your local lodge leaves your Grand Lodge. Ain't going to happen. See what I'm saying? It's the exact same relationship. So what we do then, from the level of Grand Encampment, we kind of have the philosophy of imparting to those mostly to Grand Commanderies. The Grand Commandery is responsible for their constituent commanderies. We're working with Grand Commanderies. So our philosophy is, in order for you, to get new members, you need to have members in your Grand Commandery and your constituent commanderies and whatever. But in order to attract attractive people to your organization, you have to be attractive. If you're not attractive, you're not going to attract anybody, much less attractive people. And you want to attract attractive people, because that's the future leaders. Why do we not have back in the day, the leaders in the community all belonged to our fraternity. All of them, the bankers, the lawyers, the businessmen, they all belonged. Now they don't. Why? I think, maybe it was popular back then, that probably, and that was a factor. But whatever it was, those leaders were the leaders in our commandery, the leaders in our lodge, right? So we benefited from that leadership, okay? But they're not there now. So we have to develop our own leaders. And we have to instill in our members, our Sir Knights, that you need to take the bull by the horns and develop yourself as a leader. Make your commandery attractive. Even the smallest commandery can get 3 knights together and make them look good in uniform and have a color guard, an honor guard, to present the colors at the local Legion baseball game. Yes. So they go out there and do that, and not only do they feel great about themselves, their heart's going like this, but Jay and Jeff up in the stands, our heart's going, look at that. Those are our guys. We're one of those guys. But that kind of thing, when you get out there and are attractive to the community, and also you have people that are coming through and becoming leaders because of their experience coming through the fraternity, that kind of thing happens, right? Pretty soon, your local commandery is known as a place where leaders are made in your community. Do you think if that was the prevailing thought in your town, would you have probably more people beating on the doors to become
100%.
a member?
Absolutely.
So to attract attractive people, you got to be attractive. And that's what we do more than anything else, is give the Grand Commanderies, thereby into the constituent commanderies, the tools to help them become attractive. Is that fair, Jay?
Yeah, very much so.
So that's basically what we're doing. I mean, right now, Jay's in on the meetings with us. We're meeting once a month by Zoom, and I talk to the guys every day. So we're talking all the time about stuff we're going to do in the next triennium, and we'd like to get some of it implemented before then if we can. But we're talking about what we're doing, what we're going to do for the department conferences, Or we're going to talk about protocol. We're going to have grand officer training, for the different. When you're deputy grand commander, you need to be doing this, this, and this. You're grand generalissimo, you need to be doing this, this, this. You're grand captain general, you need to be doing this, this, this. All that kind of stuff. But we have to impart the enthusiasm and the knowledge and all that kind of thing to the Sir Knights out there in the realm, so that they have the ability to go out and attract those people. And I'm very excited about it, as you can see. But, so did I answer any question? I went off on a rabbit hole someplace, you know.
So, Jamie, I'd like to direct this at you. Could you tell me how the General Grand Grand Encampment has helped the local Illinois in the Grand Line?
I guess, like Al said, you know, it keeps everything uniform for us. And we go every year. We go out to a department conference in Fort Wayne. It's been in Fort Wayne ever since I've been in line here, and even a couple of years before I got into the line. And they do offer. We have meetings about leadership. Some of the stuff is repetitive every year, but you know, we always talk. They usually give us information about what the I Foundation is. Actually, I don't know if Jay's seen his email yet or not, but we actually have got a chance to go and meet with one of the I Foundation recipients here in Illinois.
Yeah, I saw that came
and
today, I think.
we just got to get a time arranged when we can all make it. And unfortunately, it'll be the end of my year, and I may not be able to make it, but hopefully a few of the other guys can make it in the area. But yeah, they actually help. You know, like I said, if anything I need, all I got to do is, and I get a phone call every year on my birthday from Jeff. I got a phone call the first time my phone rang. It come up, said Jeff Bolstad. I'm like, first thing I thought, it's like, uh-oh, something's wrong. Somebody did something wrong. And he's like, right, Emmett, or I don't remember what I was at the time, but he goes, Jeff Bolstad just calling to say happy birthday. And I'm like, you know, that was just out of the blue. And it's like, and I know other people's gotten the call from you and they said the same thing. And it's like, you know, it's nice to hear that. You actually got some people reaching out. And I honestly, I think the next few years with Jeff, Jay, Jack, if Jay gets elected into the line, Jack coming up, and, you know, I think we got a pretty good Grand Encampment line coming up in the future. And I think we'll have a good future in it. And if you guys need anything from me, just let me know, and I'll be glad to help you out. And like I said, I had Jay do my installation for me last year. Awesome. I kind of did different than everybody else, having all the local past grands. I invited the past grands that was here for me from visiting states to do my installation for me. And Jay, everybody loved it. You know, it was something, you know, they actually got to do something besides just sit in the audience and look on. But, you know, and like I said, the Grand Encampment, as far as for me, I mean, anytime I need anything, all I got to do is call. You call down to the office, and John or Bob or anybody down there will answer any questions we need. And it may take a little while for some people to respond to you, but I know everybody's busy. I'm busy too, so I understand that. And I'm glad to have you guys here this weekend for our grand sessions, and hope you have a good time. And we got a couple more days to go, but I'll let Sam get back. And
well said, sir. Well said. Just to touch on a couple of things you said, Jeff and Jamie. So some historical facts here. United Grand Lodge of England, the building that you have there, huge building, is actually a war memorial to those who died in the First World War, our brethren who died in the First World War. What was that? What has it got to? So there was a huge Knights Templar constituency, obviously, in the United Kingdom. And I have records, historical records of commanderies of 150, 200 active members. In 1912, they all signed up, as we would do, basically. First thing a Knights Templar would sign up to fight for their country, right? And 1917, zero, all gone. So for Britain, it was several generations wiped out. That's fathers, uncles, sons, future fathers of many sons. And remember, back then, the average number of children you have, even in the 1920s, was about 4, 5, or 6. So you're talking about generations of men and masonry that was built up, and Knights Templars that built up from the 1700s. And even those like me who believe this has come from the actual Knights Templars, because we've talked about the Mark Mason's Hall, where I saw the Grand Master list beyond Jacques de Morlaix, which is actually a Mark Mason's Hall. Now, my point being is that in America, what's really interesting, in World War II, had 500,000 casualty rating. This was the largest casualty rating, and the only thing that's beaten that was COVID. So prior COVID, the most men that died in war was in military terms was World War II. Now it was so profound for the Knights Templars. So many Knights Templars died, like wiped out, killed, 500,000, and a higher propensity of those were Knights Templars. That there's a picture in the Michigan Grand Lodge of 30,000 Knights Templars and 20,000 Masons. I think it was 1948. Marching through the streets in memory of the fallen brethren who had died. Now that's 500,000 men, and out of that, a high propensity of them being Knights Templars, gone. That's dads, that's fathers, that's uncles, that's men who were future bearing children for women, just wiped out. Christians, good men who fought against the fascists and all that kind of stuff. So we had kind of like two near extinction level events. And I see us since the 50s and today as like, and you guys will understand this, is like rebuilding the second temple of King Solomon. Our temple there was a golden age in the early 1900s. If you look at all the presidents, with the exception of Woodrow Wilson up until Eisenhower, they were all Masons, right? As you said, we were everywhere. That's why I'm getting to your point. We were everywhere. But as men would, bankers, carpenters, builders, teachers, we all signed up. And most of us were the first to die, whether it's World War I in the trenches or on the beaches of Normandy, right, in World War II. And it's very hard to replenish that when you've had lodges wiped out, commanderies. It took generations to build where we were prior to two great wars. Generations, hundreds of years were lost. And here we are.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. It's funny you mentioned Michigan because that's my home state, and my home Grand Commandery, and Detroit Commandery being my home commandery. In 2026, we anticipate we will knight our 7,000th member in the history of Detroit Commandery. Many of them served in the war, right? We go all the way back to Civil War generals, and we've had a Secretary of the Army, and Charles Lindbergh was a member of Detroit Commandery. And we see the ups and downs. The thing that sustains us is the spark that is Templary being carried by every member going forward. And so we always think about the good old days when there were 2,000 members of Detroit Commandery, and now we've got 200 members, and we can lament the numbers, but you can't lament the fact that the spirit of Templary lives on through every single member. And so irrespective of where those numbers go, right, it behooves us more as the current members to make sure that we carry forward exactly what you're talking about. Exactly, right? And that we don't let the standards fall. That everyone that comes in, they take those vows, they live up to them, they carry them forward every day, and we are living examples to everybody else out there. And people will join or they won't join, but if they don't join because they can't they're not willing to live up to those standards. When they do join, they're going to live up to those standards, and they'll keep perpetuating it. And I think that's where we are right now. And that's why it's so important that you're doing what you're doing right now, and that we're keeping Templary alive.
Well, for the people listening here, this is Billy McIntyre again, and I was blessed enough to be eminent commander of our local commandery in Tancred Commandery here in Illinois, and very proud of that, and not to the degree you guys are, but I was very proud of that. And I love it. I love everything about Templary. When I seen that, I was one of those guys that joined everything in masonry. As soon as I got in, I didn't join till I was later because I worked swing shift back and forth. Thought I couldn't get involved because I just can't do it. Now I wish I'd have joined when I was 18 and just went every other month or whatever I had to do. But that's history. Anyway, so I joined everything. When I seen that order of the temple, I thought, oh my gosh, I've never seen it. And if you can see that and you're not moved, I don't think you're alive. So I say all that with this enthusiasm for the Templary I have. After talking to these two gentlemen, I'm ready to sign up again. I think I need to go through it again. So, man, I could just say, Sam's got some more to say, but I'll probably be done because I'm just blown away. But I would say thank you so much for coming on here. You guys have been great. Jamie, thank you for bringing them here. And I'll just say Godspeed, and I'll let Sam go to the next part here.
So I feel that with the Ground Encampment and people around the world listening to this, I think we've just touched the surface. This is like a prologue, an introduction, and I think it'll be great to have you guys back on and keep developing a series so people can listen. And there are many men out there who are looking for that light and just don't know that you're there. And if having you guys, I was literally, when you were talking, Jay, I was like, where's my sword? Where do I go? Sign me up again. Literally, I'm ready to fight. And that's inspiring. And, it's something that, men have been doing, Templars have been doing through the centuries. And once again, fantastic work. Thank you for all your service. God bless both of you. And can we have you back on again? And can we off air discuss, with Jamie and get you guys, and let's shine a light, basically, which I think has been missing for decades, for good men to listen in and say, you know what? That's something that I would like to do. How do I get involved? And then their journey begins like ours. What would you say to that, gentleman?
I think that fits right into my personal philosophy of inspiring others to do what it is that inspires them. And I think that if we take our vows seriously and we do the work well and exhibit excellence in everything we do about Templary, and we make sure that all the members of our commandery, even if they don't attend, they get to have relationship with the other guys in the commandery. And what I mean by that is each member, each Sir Knight would be responsible for calling 2 or 3 of the Sir Knights that you don't see very often. But if you call them once a week or invite them to coffee, don't even talk about masonry or anything. Just, hey, how you doing, Joe? Want to go have a cup of coffee, or whatever? That kind of thing. That will build the camaraderie. It will build the familial aspect of commandery, and it will surely, it has to nip in the bud that thing where you lose people for non-payment of dues and all that. Right. So if we do things the way we should do them, if we care for our people, we will inspire them to inspire others, and it's got to be great for society, great for community. Jay?
So Jay, again, I would say definitely on board with coming back. You should definitely have Jeff back. He's not only inspiring, he's empowering. And so, getting more of that out to the masses, even if they don't become Templars, the things that he has to share are going to be incredibly impactful in every walk of your life. So yeah, I think you should definitely prioritize it. Yeah. Awesome.
So what you're saying is next year you guys will be ready to come do this again.
Jay will be here for at least the next 3 years, or the next 2 years anyways. So
okay. Well, you bring as many of your gentlemen like this you can, and we're going to have a heck of a time. Yeah. And people's going to learn what it is to be a nice Templar.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to On the Level Podcast, your Masonic podcast. When you are ready, duly and truly prepared, you can always knock on the door.